Apparently, if I'm understanding this correctly, we're gonna start doing these random medical experiments on truck drivers as they drive in Australia. No ethics committee approval, no evidence-based foundation of solid science, at least not that I can see. Who needs that kind of thing anyway? No academic review process, the regulators all seemingly 100% ostrich on this one. It's really just a giant corporate case of Pigpen. This here's the rubber duck, and we're about to put the hammer down. Mercy sakes alive, dude. Looks like we got us a cluster. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, Australia only website. Card. This is fascinating. H2X Global to trial pumping oxygen into truck cabins to keep drivers alert in deal with South Korea's NFCO Limited. Sounds great. Well done. I want truck drivers alert. We all do. Hashtag Australian innovation. H2X Global, you go, girl. Tell us more. Pumping concentrated oxygen into the cabins of trucks to raise driver alertness, reduce fatigue and improve road safety will be trialled under an agreement between Victorian-based hydrogen car maker H2X Global and South Korea's NFCO Limited. A fledgling Australian hydrogen, almost but not quite, car maker you've never heard of called H2X, and a South Korean medical oxygen gas supply company you've almost certainly never heard of either, have decided to have C.W. McCall's babies. Yay. Have we asked the medical establishment whether this is wise or likely to be effective, or contacted regulators about approval for random human fatigue trials out on the road? Can't find anything on that in the press release. H2X is an Australian wannabe hydrogen mobility startup that hoovered up $86 million from a US investor recently. So I suppose they have the cash now to indulge in nonsense if they want. H2X targets commercial production by 2025. That's according to the Australian Financial Review from the 1st of August. H2X currently doesn't make vehicles, seemingly, at least not commercially, and their website doesn't even list a physical office address, at least not that I could find. Like, no showroom, dude. But they are selling the green dream, and we all want that. I can't see where they say the cars aren't quite ready yet either, but nor is there a buy now button. Still, it's all very tantalising indeed, I have to say. If you Google H2X, the first search result, at least the first one that I got, screams zero emissions vehicles. Yes, right there in the metadata. An expression which the ACCC recently declared misleading and deceptive. Oops-a-daisy. So, I'm forming the view that H2X is mainly an attention-seeking thought bubble. The wonder bra of hydrogen vehicles, perhaps. But let that not deter us here and now from learning even more about this exciting new, bold oxygen gas initiative. CEO and co-founder of H2X Global Limited, Mr. Brendan Norman, said he was excited about this pioneering endeavour. He says pioneering endeavour, I say unsubstantiated horse shit, but that's just a personal opinion, dude, and I could well be wrong. Perhaps we could meet somewhere in the middle and agree on pioneering unsubstantiated horse shit endeavour. Anything's possible. That just rolls off the tongue in any case, doesn't it? And there's more. Our partnership with NF goes beyond traditional collaboration. By integrating their oxygen concentrator into our vehicles, we aim to redefine driver well-being and contribute to a healthier and more alert driving experience. Okay, very virtuous indeed, and we all want that for truckies. Honestly, I'd rather work in a chicken processing plant than actually be a truckie, but our way of life in this country depends heavily on truckies, so I am a huge fan, albeit one who never really wants to play in the C.W. McCall frickin' boy band. Never understood the allure of sitting in a jimmy hauling hogs about a mile out of Shaky Town or, anywhere else where smokies were as thick as bugs on a bumper kind of thing. Negatory, dude. I'm just not feeling it, H2X's emotionally uplifting and intellectually stimulating oxygen gas announcement motivates me to wonder, is there any actual science behind this quaint idea? Oxygen enrichment benefits include increased alertness, reduced fatigue, and improved cognitive function. Really? I had no idea. Perhaps we should therefore all be carrying around a little dose of O2 in a can for cognitively demanding situations. Provided it's not just abject horse shit. Why don't airline pilots do this? Suck only on the pure stuff in flight. Or MMA fighters, or even the world's top brain transplant surgeons, or people confronted routinely by ex-wives number 3 and 5, the sisters. So competitive. Very cognitively demanding situations, all of that. Right? Perhaps we should hook the National Monument to the Death of Integrity to some giant fuck-off oxygen gas generator. No guarantees it'll reverse the stream, but hey, might be worth a shot. But deep down, I'm feeling that it might not be worth the effort. Actual science, like biology, medicine, inconvenient vocations such as this, seem to suggest that we humans are designed to operate in a state of blood oxygen homeostasis. Blood oxygen levels are pretty frickin' static in healthy people. Blood has this finite capacity to absorb oxygen gas, and most healthy people's blood is already pretty much maxed out on that. This seems to be an established medical fact, albeit an inconvenient one. In healthy dudes and dudettes, blood oxygen saturation is typically 95 to 100%. And this means that your blood flowing in your veins and arteries right now, if you are that healthy dude or dudette, is already carrying 95 to 100% of the maximum amount of oxygen gas that it is capable of carrying. They measure this in hospital or in the ambo, transporting you rapidly there with a thing called a pulse oximeter. It's that little thing they clamp onto your finger to assist them in confirming that you're actually still with us and therefore the lights and sirens are still warranted, right? So even if it's the dark of the moon on the frickin' 6th of June and you are mainlining straight O2 behind that Jimmy hauling hogs, your blood simply does not have the capacity to suck up very much more oxygen at all, unless you're already quite sick. If your pulse ox is 98, it can only go to 100. That's not much of a potential boost, is it? So, in my estimation, this is all starting to sound like other export-grade bullshit ideas, such as putting nitrogen in tyres of cars, aromatherapy, and everything ScoMo ever said or did. By keeping drivers alert and reducing fatigue, we aim to enhance safety on the road, reducing accidents associated with driver drowsiness or inattention. Yeah, okay, but a vegan might extol the alleged virtues of replacing a beef patty with a jackfruit stuffed with, lentils and mycoprotein, and explain how that's going to make my hamburger so much better. But I'm almost certain it won't do that. H2X's core message, mainlining O2 will redefine truck driver well-being, health alertness, reduce fatigue and improve cognitive performance. We'd all want that, would we not, for truckies and ourselves? How much oxygen are we talking about adding anyway? The oxygen concentrator would be positioned to face the driver, creating an oxygen-rich environment inside the vehicle that was 40% higher than typical levels. I see. Fascinating. So ambient air is 21% oxygen gas typically, and 21% times 1.4 for a 40% boost there is 29.4% O2. awesome. I don't know about you, but I would define the cab of a truck as a fairly confined space, wouldn't you? Like, it's enclosed, and the enclosure is hardly spacious, like one cat by the tail, max. Frickin' cats, dude. Not to be trusted. Perhaps, and I'm just putting it out there on this one, there might exist somewhere generally accepted workplace health and safety guidelines for oxygen gas concentration limits in confined spaces. Unsafe oxygen levels. Air normally contains 21% oxygen by volume, although oxygen levels of 19.5% to 23.5% by volume are considered to be safe. Safe Work Australia there, Confined Spaces Code of Practice. The workplace confined space upper limit oxygen gas concentration is 23.5% O2 by volume. The H2X proposal 29.4, which is 25% higher than the workplace confined space upper limit FYI FFS. We can all agree that low oxygen levels are bad, of course, like below 18% you get this big dose of brain fog, under 12% unconsciousness is likely, and below 6% you're generally going to wake up dead, and therefore you'll have to explain your internet browsing history to St. Peter. And he's heard it all before, dude. You will not be needing a jacket where you're going. I'll see you there. Mountaineering, of course, has this thing, they call it a death zone, where the oxygen gas concentration is only about 1/3 of what it is here at roughly sea level. From memory, it's above about 8,000 metres, the death zone. And they call it the freaking death zone for a reason. You will not be able to think straight, and you're in a race against the clock. And if you get it wrong, you are headed straight into that long-term bivvy bag, dude, making a right Walt Disney of yourself. But if low O2 is bad, and it is, it does not follow that higher than normal is better than normal. That's just a piece of epic non-logic. High oxygen gas levels are dangerous. You can breathe 100% O2 at 1 atmosphere absolute pretty safely, right? Just don't light a cigarette or a freaking barbecue. Above 23.5% O2, however, the increased risk of fire and explosion is deemed unsafe for work in a confined space by experts, with good reason. There's lots of flammable things inside and around trucks generally. Plastics, electricity, flannelette shirt, mullet haircut, ZZ Top beard. It's a powder keg in there, dude. And okay, a truck cabin is not, strictly speaking, a confined workspace, but it does share many of the same salient features, and H2X is proposing 29.4% O2, which is 25% higher than the level generally regarded as safe from a workplace health and safety perspective. So, we kind of know that this is somewhat risky in the domain of fire and explosion, like science says it's risky. Apollo 1 says pretty fucking risky. That was 100% O2 at about 1/3 of an atmosphere there. A Chuck Yeager incident in the modified F-104A, if memory serves, head catching fire after ejecting, suffering second-degree burns promoted by pure O2 environment in the flight suit, says elevated O2 levels are pretty fucking dangerous. In order to do this responsibly, therefore, there would have to be a Himalaya of evidence screaming out that the benefits of doing this outweigh the risks. And I couldn't find any. But before we go there exactly, are we going to be conducting this experiment, what, in a lab? Or how exactly and where are we going to do it? Professional drivers will be engaged in the testing of the system to provide feedback in real-world conditions. Really? Are there any real-world conditions for testing truck driver fatigue and cognitive performance that do not involve driving actual trucks on actual public roads for extended periods? Because, dude, if there are, I really can't think of any. Like, a simulator really isn't real-world conditions, is it? Nor is driving endless laps of some test track at Mount Cotton or something. Measures will be put in place to control the oxygen supply in the cabin to ensure it always remains at safe levels. Sorry, that's too easy to repudiate. It's too easy to make the case that 29.4% is widely regarded as unsafe. And I would so love to see H2X's risk assessment on doing this. Perhaps this heightened risk of fire and explosion could be balanced against a potential benefit in alertness, but I really can't find any current scientific evidence that boosted oxygen gas levels in the air translate to improved driving performance. I did find this 20-year-old South Korean study from 2003, which was published in 2005 in Applied Ergonomics. That used 10 college students in their 20s driving a simulator and sucking up 18%, 21% and 30% oxygen gas for 2 hours apiece on consecutive days. The authors presented a total of 25 subjective data points on fatigue. Like, the students told the researchers how they felt every half an hour for 2 hours. Then they compared 30% O2 to 21% O2 and the low one as well, but I'm going to forget about the low one. When they compared the 30%, like the elevated O2, to the O2 that you're breathing now, the results were generally very close indeed, but the high O2 did tend to be marginally better subjectively, and the key word there is subjectively. This is 10 college kids driving a video game 20 years ago, not professionals actually driving trucks, let's not forget. Of those 25 data points, the normal and the high O2 were basically line ball for 21 of those points. The high O2 group actually performed worse than the standard O2 group for 7 of those points. And there's some overlap here because many of those worst performances were also very close performances. So apologies if that's a bit ambiguous. But there did seem to be a small improvement in subjective ability to concentrate after an hour sucking on high O2, i.e. it seemed to the college kids that they were better at concentrating, but this was not objectively verified in any way. They also measured reaction time when told to stop, but the difference between high and standard O2 levels was only like 20 to 40 milliseconds at 30, 60 and 90 minutes, and the high O2 group were worse for one of those tests. The high O2 group was a little over 1/10 of a second quicker to react at the 2-hour mark compared with the standard O2 group, however. Where they did perform better on 30% O2, the improvement was generally pretty small and they didn't always perform better. The authors concluded in part that, quote, evaluation with real cars is needed. I don't see any evidence that this has ever occurred, however, and it's been 2 decades, so there's been ample time. And I did look for that confirmation, that latter research. This 2023 Australian study, published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, surveyed 332 actual professional truck drivers. 60% were older than 45, 85% were employees, 98% were dudes, in as much as you can actually know that stuff with confidence anymore. More than 80% were overweight or obese, that is, they had a body mass index of 25 or more, and 35% said that their health was, quote, poor to fair, which means worse than good for the purposes of that study. And this sounds about right to me. This is a snapshot of ambient truckies. The authors found that the odds of being in the high-risk fatigue group were 3 times higher for drivers who worked 40 to 60 hours a week compared with those who worked 40 hours or less. Poor sleep, it increased the odds of high-risk fatigue by a massive 7 times. Loneliness, like social isolation, doubled the odds of high-risk fatigue. So if we take the 20-year-old South Korean study as absolute gospel on the virtue of oxygen, we're talking milliseconds and line ball closeness in subjective fatigue on elevated O2 versus actual known and established causes of high-risk fatigue like overwork, poor sleep and social isolation. Massive increases in risk associated with those 3 factors, 3, 7 and 2 times respectively. Heaven forbid if you are that truckie who is overworked, sleep deprived and properly lonely. High oxygen gas, minor gains at best. Major increase in fire or explosion risk. I doubt that hoovering up this dubious elevated O2 is a remedy for overwork, lack of rest and or isolation. And it would properly suck if O2 therapy became another urban myth on this. Like, fatigue, dude, it's cured. Just suck on this. This could easily happen during the golden age of bullshit in which we, of course, currently live. H2X Global to keep drivers alert with oxygen. Well done, Australian Manufacturing Forum. Awesome cut and paste of a press release. Thank you so much for amplifying another seemingly bullshit message, personal opinion. P.S. What you've done there, that's not the same thing as journalism. I would argue that the cure for truck driver fatigue is not sexy, but pretty clearly it is work for a sustainable period of time, get enough quality sleep, and spend some real quality time in the hot tub with the girls next door. That's pretty clearly the opposite of social isolation, is it not? Getting in shape might help as well, because you truckies do have a fairly sedentary job. And sure, if you've actually got low blood oxygen saturation, that makes you pretty sick, and they're going to jam a mask on your face in the ambulance and rush you to hospital, and you are going to get force-fed raw oxygen gas in that situation. But if you are that sick, you should not be driving a truck, and you probably would not be capable of it in any case. If you're healthy, your blood is already saturated with O2 pretty much, and it can't hold significantly more, no matter how combustible or explosive you make the in-cabin environment. So it seems to me that this H2X truck driver O2 enrichment proposal is mostly virtuous sounding snake oil bullshit from a driver, safety, health, etc. perspective. It's awesome from a marketing perspective, however. Like, it sounds so high-tech and sexy, and we're fixing an important problem. Provided some, horribly inconvenient arsehole doesn't point out how the fire and explosion hazard goes off the charts in these conditions. Personally, I think it would be immoral and unethical for Boeing, for example, to conduct experiments on its aircraft while passengers are aboard. Likewise, civil engineers should refrain from building experimental, sustainable buildings out of, beeswax and spider webs or something, until the construction methodology is scientifically verified. Mechanical engineers shouldn't hand experimental weapons to troops in battle, and trucking startups shouldn't be motivated to do mad experiments increasing the fire and explosion risk on drivers just because it sounds exciting in a press release. Don't get me wrong, dude, we're all products of the age in which we live, are we not? Like, your ancestors were standing there at the end of the Stone Age with, Raquel Welch in a loincloth bikini. It's all good, dude, like, so uplifting. And then some asshole from the next village just skewers you with a gold-coloured spear. Bastard. Who knew brass and tin could be so friggin' hilarious and versatile? Then the Iron Age is going to usher itself in like, fuck you, bronze, right? The Age of Enlightenment. Everyone loved that, except possibly, the Pope and his henchmen. The Nuclear Age, or the Nuclear Age, as George W. Bush II would have put it. So friggin' tantalising. Just jump under the desk, kiddies, and shut your eyes. It'll all be over directly. What are you worried about? Then the Space Age. Like, dude, stick your proton energy pill up your ass, Roger Ramjet. But live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you, dude. Followed logically enough by the golden age of bullshit, the present day, the most liberating and uplifting time to be alive ever, where the facts no longer matter and reality is more side-splitting and unpredictable than actual comedy could have ever hoped to be.